Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Business Essentials podcast. I'm your host, Veronika, and today we're going to be speaking with Andrew Clarke. Andrew is the CEO of Expanding Wallet, where he inspires young adults to go after their big dreams and gives them the financial education they need to create generational wealth.
When I look at America, we have many opportunities here, but many people are blind to those opportunities because they lack that financial education. It's not just even missing opportunities. It's sometimes we might make certain decisions that'll actually make the things we really want in life harder to obtain. I really do it to help create more leaders. If you can't support yourself, it's hard for you to then be a leader and support the community or the world around you.
If you want to learn about finance, credit, and how to start building that generational wealth, stick around and I'll be back with Andrew right after this.
Tony Robbins once said, "No matter how many mistakes you make or how slow you progress, you are still way ahead of everyone who isn't trying." This is the Biz Essentials. You want to grow, get ahead, keep the spark. Here you'll get valuable insights and empowerment to grow personally and professionally. Isn't it about time you turn your dreams into successful passion projects? Learn how to be productive, be successful, be joyful, and more importantly, be yourself. The B Essentials. This is the Biz Essentials. And this is your host, Veronika of Veronika Ventures.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Andrew Clarke. Andrew, I'm so excited to get started. This is such an important topic. But before we do, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
So my name's Andrew Clarke. I'm the founder and CEO of Expanding Wallet. I really wanted to help, especially young adults, learn skills to create generational wealth. And so there's both the financial education piece, and then there's also the other half, more of the inspirational side. On the educational side, we have financially empowering articles on the website. And then about every quarter, I put on a virtual workshop on a wide range of things, but basically anything that deals with money. And then I have a YouTube channel, and on there I put more inspirational and educational content videos out there. And then I interview people who have come from rough backgrounds, but they have found a purpose, have been able to live in that purpose and financially support themselves and their family. I really do it to help create more leaders. If you can't support yourself, it's hard for you to then be a leader and support the community or the world around you.
Absolutely. That sounds wonderful. And to touch on what you just said, it's kind of like the hierarchy of needs, right? If you have, even though money doesn't buy happiness, if you have the money to get all of your needs met, then you have the opportunity to really delve into reflecting on yourself and how you contribute to your communities. How did you get started with this? What led you down this path?
Born in Jamaica, came when I was very young, so I was only 3. My mom would work over 100 hours a week to support our internal family, and we had relatives back home who couldn't support themselves. So her one income was usually taking care of like 8 people. Again, because you don't learn this stuff in school, and she's so busy working, she doesn't have time to learn. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way to make money. So at 15, I started reading books. Rich Dad, Poor Dad was like the book,
Right.
In that book, I see my mom in that she's like the poor dad. And it's not poor in the sense of not having any income, but poor in the sense of the scarcity mindset. Well, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. The rich dad mindset is always different, right? It's like, well, how can we afford that? Through talking to my mom and just kind of saying, well, why can't you be more like this dad? And she ended up getting her real estate license because, that book was pretty big on real estate. And then at 18, I ended up getting my license. And we had the opportunity at that time, Robert Kiyosaki had a program for real estate investing. These were some amazing real estate gurus. In 18, 19, 20, I'm learning so much about not just about how to invest into apartment buildings, rentals, but also how money works. And then about credit and alternative financing. So going outside of just a bank.
What would you tell an 18-year-old if they really wanted to start building this generational wealth? How can they do that? What are the first steps they should take?
What I did at 18, 19, 20, basically throughout college was I focused on building up my credit score. Now I saved some money, but my goal was to have a high enough credit score that as soon as possible when I graduated, I could buy a rental property. And specifically a multifamily rental property because I would be able to live in one side and rent out the other. And that would actually reduce my expenses dramatically, because usually that's the biggest of your living costs. Anyhow, there's credit cards that are great for someone who doesn't really have any credit yet. And so you start with one of those cards. The key, I would say, and it's funny because it sounds basic, but it's those basic fundamentals, is have a budget. No matter what the limit is on your card, know what you can afford to pay off at the end of the month, and don't go over that. During that time, I was putting things on the card, always paying it off at the end of the month, paying on time, huge, don't pay late. Do those things, those basics. And then the third thing, you can call the credit card company every 6 months and you can request a credit limit increase. By the time I graduate, now my credit score is high enough. The next dilemma is the other half of buying a property is having enough money.
Right.
I had the credit score, but I didn't have enough money. And I get my job out of college and it's like my dream job. I ended up working for a very small consulting company at the time, but I loved everybody in there that I interviewed with. But the thing was, I think because of their size, when they made me the offer, I was really disappointed because it was 18% less and I had a budget. I still wanted that multifamily. That was like my goal. Like I didn't care about a car. I didn't care about anything else. So like that's the first major purchase I'm going to make outside of college. And in my budget, I was going to get an apartment and I was going to probably pay, I think at that time, about $700 a month. Well, if I can't do anything about my pay at the time, I got to change my expenses. So I ended up living at home and paying my mom $150 a month. And that gave me just enough then to save. And so 9 months later, I purchased my first investment property at the age of 24. Me buying that duplex at the time that I did and having that financial knowledge, that definitely changed my life, probably generations to come, because having that property to offset the living expense, that allowed me then to focus on getting out of debt. So by 26, so 2 years later, I pay off all my bad debt. And then I start looking into other investments. So I get into stock investing. So I got really good at being a long-term stock investor and finding great companies before they're like mainstream, even before they're on major exchanges like the NASDAQ. And so that's why I decided to teach, or at least start a platform that will allow me to help out, because the hardest part is really getting started and then to keep going, because there will definitely be mistakes, there will be setbacks, but that's how you learn. And so that's why I do it.
Awesome. So I want to go back and touch on a few things that you stated and make sure that I got everything correct. So what you were saying is when you are in school, even before you graduate, you need to start building your credit and you need to start saving. And the best way to start building your credit is to apply for credit cards, but then make sure that you can pay them off every month because you don't want that revolving debt. And also, when you start saving, you need to make sure that you create a budget so that then you can look at what your expenses are and adjust accordingly, because or else you go after, like you said, the things that we want, but maybe we don't want them as much as we want our real big goal, but we don't know that unless we put the numbers down, right? It's about making those smart choices once you have the numbers of what you need and what you have. I just want to touch on for our listeners, what's considered bad debt is usually credit card debt. So credit cards have what's called revolving debt. So it actually compounds on top of each other, which is why your credit card keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, even though you're paying that minimum monthly payment. That doesn't help. Pay it off every month, because if you're paying 18%, it's not 18%. It's really 18% on $100 today, and then on 100 and whatever the percentage increase is every single day. Better debt would be considered like car loans and mortgages, because those are installment debts and they don't compound. Absolutely never pay something late. Like you were saying, but if you have to choose, because there are those times where you're like, man, I just really can't make ends meet. Something happened and my budget just got blown out of the water. If you have to choose between paying things late, pay your credit card debt late, keep your installment and your mortgage on time, because those will factor much bigger, much greater into your credit score and into your ability to buy a home. Just wanted to put those out there because those are things that I see a lot when I was a loan officer.
Great advice. I almost didn't do a workshop on the credit. I was going to jump into, okay, let's talk about investment at properties. Like, how do you get into multifamilies? But so many people were asking about credit. I'm like, well, we can't jump to multifamily then. We can't get to that yet. So we got to go to credit. And so it's really good that you mentioned those points.
Thank you. Yeah. And it just comes from years of experience of working with people who sometimes were buying their first home. I mean, I had a client, God bless them, they were like, well, we were going to pay off that truck anyway, so we just decided to pay it late this month so that we could pay off this other debt, and we'll just pay that off next month. And I'm like, that's not the way things work. Your credit score just went down. For those that don't know, and I hope you all are gaining some value from this, the reason you want your credit score to be good is because not only does it affect your ability to get a loan, but it's going to affect your interest rate. And that's huge.
Yes.
I had a client when I was doing loans who was paying 17% on his car. Because his credit score was so poor when he got his car that he was paying 17% interest on like a really good car because he was a doctor.
It is nice to have a nice car. Most people graduating college, the first thing they buy is a nice car. So when I got my property at 24, I drove my high school car. My car was getting rusty. I was kind of teased about it. And I think a big thing is that you want to know what your big goal is, and don't sacrifice and get these little things that don't really get you towards your big goals, right? So my big goal was the property, but there were things that came with getting that property. I needed to renovate it, and I had to borrow money to renovate that property. I actually borrowed $18,000. That $18,000 actually came from a credit card. 0% for 18 months, $18,000. And so this is where building up that credit, increasing those limits really helped. And this was one of the things that I talked about in the Power of Credit workshop. And I went into details on what to look for and how do you kind of set these things up. And I did that because I needed to renovate it to get the rent prices up. And I did this quick. I was planning for it. I knew what I wanted to get done, got the contractors. In about a month, we get it renovated. And then those renovations increased the rental price by $300 a month. And every month I'm paying $1,000 to the credit card company because I want to pay it off while it's still at 0%. And at that time, I mean, I was living tight. It was pretty much paycheck to paycheck after paying that $1,000. And here's the bad side, right? I ended up getting car issues and I couldn't pay it off. So I had to balance transfer it. Well, for people who don't know what that is, that means moving it from one credit card to another. Even though it's again, I transfer it so I get 0% again on the compound interest, and I've got to pay a flat fee of 2%. And so I continue paying that $1,000. So 6 months later, I pay it off. So in 24 months, I borrowed $21,000 that cost me $120. Most people would have went to a bank or got a loan somewhere, and they would have paid thousands for that money. That's the power of credit. And that's why it's so important to understand it. And now I grinded, right? It was tough those 2 years. Now I'm like free to go and invest.
Right. Yeah, and that's amazing. And I love your idea of making sure that you get a multifamily residence because, to your point, not only do you then have reduced living expenses, but then you can also finance it as a primary property instead of an investment property, which will give you better interest rates.
Lower taxes,
exactly.
Too. Home ownership.
What would you suggest for someone my age who wants to start getting into building that generational wealth?
The first question I would say is, before we even talk about risk, would be, what is your end game? What is your ultimate goal? There's a educational piece and there's this like psychological piece. And the educational piece is, okay, you go and learn all this knowledge. Great. You know how to do it. Then you got to face the psychological part, which is you taking the jump. And there's 3 reasons why I believe people don't go after their big dreams. It's because they don't believe they have enough money, they don't believe they have enough time, or they don't believe in themselves enough. I think we can miss out big opportunities because we think short term. And it's kind of like that whole rich dad, poor dad philosophy of like, well, how can I make this happen? These are my circumstances, but I still want this. So how can I make it happen? And I'll tell one quick story. Probably the biggest reason I do this is, again, it's not so much like to just have money to have money. I really feel there's this journey you're on, and there's something inherently that, you're meant to fulfill on. Friend of mine at 22 was a college student, didn't know what he wanted to do, but he's doing what's expected of him, right? In high school, he wanted to be a movie scriptwriter, and he was a pretty good writer, and he was always funny. We go to a comedy show, open mic. I realized, like, bro, you should actually try this. He looks at me and he laughs because he's not from here. He's from Yemen, and he kind of has an accent. And so I'm like, no, for real, you can do this. Let's just try it. So for 1 week, he writes his jokes. We practice in his garage. He almost doesn't do it. finally gets the courage to do it. He kills it. Well, for that year, I went to every single comedy show with him. He wouldn't go without me. And we realized, like, this is something for him. Like, this is it. We think he is going to be like the next Kevin Hart, right? And so he continues. He has the passion for it, the drive, and he believes in himself and he's putting in the time. But he had one big issue. He wasn't great when it came to money management. He would do all the things we said not to do with the credit cards, not paying on time, overspending, and this is after years. He's really improving. He's getting good. And one day I have a serious talk with him and I tell him, Ali, look, if you really want to make it, you got to get your money situation right. Because one day there's going to come an opportunity that's probably going to require you to travel somewhere and you're going to need your credit card to be free. And I'm not even kidding you. When he put his big goal in front of him, he really stopped wasting money on the things that were really going to keep him away from his big dream. And now it took a while, but let me tell you what happened. Back in July, he was the first comedian on The Late Show after the pandemic. His YouTube video was viewed by over 100,000 people. It's just been amazing to watch his journey because that opportunity came to be in a comedy festival in New York. And he went to it and they invited him year after year for 4 years. Not paid, had to again invest in himself and have his credit cards available. He auditioned for Kevin Hart, gets on, and someone saw him on the Kevin Hart show and remembered him from New York. That person contacted him, they got him in touch with Comedy Central, and he made it full time. When you operate with that sense of determination and you come every day ready to play and you give everything you got, people start to notice that. And eventually, the right people will come along. But you still have to put in all of that work every single day because that's going to prepare you for that opportunity. And it happened with Ali. It happened with me. There's a couple other friends I could tell you their stories too. It's so easy to get caught up in like the material things and the things right now that will make you look flashy, look good, but will it really make you feel fulfilled on the inside?
That's a great message for everybody to hear because it's not just about, like you said, making the money or being able to retire, but it's about being able to retire and still do the things that light you up. Because I do honestly believe that everybody has that little spark in them, the things that kind of make you happy and light you up in the way that nothing else does. And then if you pursue that and do that as a living, I think you make the world a better place and you are way happier.
It's definitely important to take the time to really discover yourself. I think sometimes that's a problem because you're so busy doing the mundane or the routine that you sometimes never have time to stop and think, am I actually heading in a direction that's going to make me happy? You have to be deliberate to make time for that and ask yourself those questions.
Absolutely. Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about what you do and maybe seek your advice?
There's Instagram at Expanding Wallet. You can contact me through the website.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll be sure to put all of that information in the show notes for our listeners. Before we wrap up, did you have any final thoughts or anything that we may have missed?
Life is a journey. Don't beat yourself up. And this is coming from someone who can be very hard on themselves, but I can tell you when I got to being 30, just looking back on the struggles, the obstacles, and where I'm at now, I'm like, it all kind of works its way out as long as you're willing to learn from it. That's why the inspirational piece is so big for me because I've been behind in multiple areas of my life. Academically, was behind in school. My mom was a big factor in that. Never called me dumb, never called me stupid. Always really spoke to my greatness, and eventually the right person came into my life. It was actually a special ed teacher. I was put in special ed. She really transformed my thinking. When I started working with her, I wanted to see results very quickly. I think this is something that in society we want to see results very quickly. We judge ourselves on those results being quick. I became very frustrated after a few weeks of working with her, and I told her, this isn't working for me. I think I should just go back to class. And her name was Mrs. Nelson, and she turned and looked at me and said, Andrew, when you're learning something new, the best thing that you can do is be patient with yourself. And after that, I started to focus less on those day-to-day results and more on the work that she was asking me to do. And I had to work with her for 2 years. But after those 2 years, we took a standardized test, the same type of standardized test again. And I went from being behind to reading 3 years ahead of the average student. And the teacher had said she had never seen anything like that. By the time I graduated high school, I was high honors, chemistry student of the year, physics student of the year, passed out of college level English. And so my message is to remember that no matter where you are, the important part is starting. And you might be behind when you start, and that's okay. But don't give up. Be persistent, regardless of the short-term results, because you still can excel. It's never easy. I'm not going to say like any of this was easy. It's definitely hard, but it's worth the fight. That's my message.
I completely agree with you. Mindset is such a huge portion of everything that we do. And having the right mindset around money and building that generational wealth is super important. So, Andrew, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. And guys, I'll be back to wrap up the show right after this. So what did you guys think? I hope we were able to provide you some tips, tricks, tools, and strategies to get started on building that generational wealth. But as Dawn said last week when we were talking about cybersecurity, when it comes to certain matters, you just don't know what you don't know. It's always great to consult some subject matter experts. Whatever the case may be, don't wait to get started. Spark your momentum today so that you can start the life that you've always wanted. Anyway, guys, thank you again so much for joining me today. I'll see you next time on the Biz Essentials.
You've been listening to the Biz Essentials. Thanks for listening to the show. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information, learning how to be productive, be successful, be joyful, and more importantly, be yourself, and turning your dreams into successful passion projects. By listening to this show, you've already set into motion the most important part, starting. So it's important to catch the next episode. Make sure to like, rate, and review the show. In the meantime, hook up with us on social media at Veronika Ventures and at the Biz Essentials. Till next time, this is the Biz Essentials.
Today's quote of the day is by comedian Chris Rock. He once said, "Wealth is not about having a lot of money. It's about having a lot of options." And in today's episode, Andrew kind of showed us that with some examples from his own life. Anyway, guys, I want to thank you again so much for joining me, and I'll catch you next time on the Biz Essentials. Bye.